All right. What's up, everyone? It's your boy Ultimate, and I'm here with a special guest, Gabe from Wilt Chamberlain is the GOAT. And today we're just going to have a conversation about why Wilt Chamberlain is the most dominant player in NBA history. So, Gabe, what is it that makes you think Wilt is the most dominant player in NBA history?
Well, first off, he was just if anywhere you read, anyone that wanted to face against Wilt Chamberlain had to have an overwhelmingly way better team.
Yep.
Unless you're counting his way younger years where he was just point scoring on really shitty
Yeah.
teams. Wait, real quick. Am I good?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Alright, cool. Because I
Don't worry about it.
Alright, but secondly, a lot of people say he played in a weak era. I think it's completely the opposite.
So what about
Because
that era? Because everyone says that everyone was shorter, yeah, but I don't think he was in a weak era either. So what do you think made that era competitive compared to what people have to say about it?
Well, first off, the ref calls were way less lenient towards like players. Basically, the refs had to see someone get like really whacked if they wanted to even begin to call
Yeah,
anything. So it was one of those situations where if you get contact while you're coming up, they probably won't call the whistle unless you're getting like
hammered.
your
Yeah,
entire arms like
it
slammed
was
to the
like
ground.
compared to today, you can't even touch a guy without getting a
Hmm.
technical foul. But but
Not at
yeah,
all.
he wasn't the only 7 foot player in the league at that time.
Oh no, there was
And he had to
plenty.
go against
There's
super stacked team like Bill Russell Celtics, like a team full of Hall of Famers. You can't say that he had weak competition. And Wilt
Yeah,
Chamberlain was one of the most athletic players of all time. Can you elaborate a bit
definitely.
more on that?
So it's said that his vertical was around 48
Yeah.
inches. It might not
Yeah,
get
but even if
there.
it's not
It could be a
48,
little bit
anything
exceeded.
over 40 for a guy who's 7'1" is just insane.
Yeah, he at least had a 40-inch vertical because there's videos of him going up for the ball and his
Yeah.
shoulder being
And
above the
touching
rim.
the top of a backboard with ease.
Oh yeah, he was a freak of nature. I think he was most likely the most athletic
I
player
gotta
ever in the
agree with
game.
that. Like when he was at the University of Kansas, he won the high jump event at the Big 8 track and field championship 3 years in a row. Like that's insane for a
Yeah,
guy who's that high or that tall and doing the crazy athletic shit that he's doing. Like as strong as Shaq was, he was nowhere near as quick as Wilt Chamberlain or as
oh
fast as him.
definitely.
And he was also
I
and he
would
was
agree
also
with
one of
that.
the strongest players in NBA history too. So could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, there's researches and stuff like that, and he said in multiple interviews he could at least bench 500 pounds
Which
at
is
his hardest.
insane. Like Shaq, as strong as he was, I think he can only bench like 300 or something like that. I have to check
I think it was 300, 400,
exactly,
something like
which is
that.
nowhere near him. Wilt Chamberlain was weightlifting with Arnold Schwarzenegger and those guys, easily lifting up grown men like they were nothing.
Yeah, I watched a interview with Arnold talking about Wilt Chamberlain, and he's talking about how he's outlifting Arnold like the entire
Yeah,
time. Like he'd go to the machine and he'd pick like the highest weight that all like his
yeah,
bodybuilders were doing, and he'd do it
exactly.
easily.
Like you can't imagine just going up against a guy that strong, that fast, and just insane. And he also had the accolades too. Like he was a 7 time scoring champion. And so for the people who think that Wilt Chamberlain was only a scorer, what do you have to say about that?
I think that's ridiculous because if you look at the statistics, even like 'cause a lot of people say, oh, it's like if you watch the games, he's like not passing at all. There's plenty of passing clips of Wilt
Exactly.
Chamberlain. He was a dominant passer. He's the only center ever to lead the league in assists in a single
Facts.
year. Like
Well, I think Nikola
he
Jokic might
averaged
do that one
8.6
year,
or
but
something.
yeah, exactly.
He might,
Maybe
and
exactly, but
I could see it
right
happening,
now it's only
but
Wilt Chamberlain, which is insane
it's only
for a
Wilt.
guy who is known
Yeah,
as mainly over a scorer. And even Shaq was
yeah.
a bit of a playmaker himself, but he was nowhere near Wilt Chamberlain's level when he was on the Lakers.
Yeah, I think the to go back to the point of like the weak era, if you look at like the centers, a lot of people say, "Oh, they're all 6'6" white dudes," and if you look at it, it's just not
Exactly.
true. There's Walter Dukes, who is 7'1", Swade Hallbrook, 7'3", and Mel Counts, who is
And he would
7 feet
just
tall.
dominate all of them like they were nothing.
Oh
And then
yeah,
even at the
these players.
oh
You
yeah,
go
so I
ahead.
was gonna say even at the end of his career, he matched up against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, arguably the best center of all time. So what do
Oh
you
yeah.
think about the case of why Wilt Chamberlain is a greater center than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?
Well, for example, when he went against Kareem, they had these really big duels, and if you look at the footage, it'd be Kareem just shooting these hooks and stuff, and some of them would go in. No one's ever been able to
The sky
block
hook,
Kareem's
exactly.
hook except for Wilt.
Exactly.
There's footage of him blocking his hook.
Exactly, and Wilt could do the hook. I saw this clip where Wilt Chamberlain was doing that sky hook from the 3-point line, which is just insane.
Oh yeah, that's a great
And
video.
guys like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had a way more help than Will ever did in his career. Kareem had Oscar Robertson to help him win his first chip, I'm pretty sure, and then he had Magic Johnson, Byron Scott, and James Worthy for the rest of his career. So all these other great centers like Hakeem Olajuwon had Clyde Drexler, Shaq had Wade and Kobe. But yeah, Wilt had Jerry West near the end of his career, and Elgin Baylor was on his last legs, barely in the league when he was playing with Wilt.
Yeah, a lot of people say that Wilt was on a super team near the end of his career, and it was a little weird of a comparison because you look at like, say like KD, Kyrie,
James Harden.
and James Harden.
And
That's
they're
a
all
super
in their
team.
prime. Wilt
They're all
Chamberlain was with those
yeah,
guys at the end of his career and at the end of their careers. So that's like a better comparison would be the Brooklyn Nets team with Brooke Lopez, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett, where they're all at the end
yeah,
of his career and they still won a ring
exactly.
together.
Exactly. So it's also a thing of a lot of people get this situation misconstrued. On the championship team that Wilt was on, Elgin Baylor retired halfway through the
Exactly.
year because of
And
a
he
knee
didn't even
injury.
get the ring.
So he didn't even get to go to the
Exactly, which
championship.
sucks for Elgin Baylor, but it's true. He wasn't even on that team in the finals. And they still managed to get together and win the chip that year.
Yeah.
So is there anything so when you think of Wilt Chamberlain versus Shaq, how do you think they stack up against each other?
So I would say a lot of people they'll say it goes one way or the other. Some people say he'd get dominated. Some people say Wilt would dominate them. I think honestly it'd be pretty even
Yeah.
because the thing is, Wilt was an absolute monster in
Yeah.
the paint, but so is Shaq. I think they're both equally strong, if not Wilt
Yeah.
stronger. And Shaq doesn't shoot no free throws,
Yeah.
neither does Wilt. I think it would be a really even matchup, coming down to who would hit the better
The one
shots.
thing I think that separates, well, not the one thing, but the biggest differentiator between those two is I think Wilt Chamberlain had way more stamina than Shaq did. Because as
Definitely.
for his career, he averaged 45.8 minutes per game. Even though the game is 48 minutes long, he barely took any breaks. And that dip in minutes per game was only at the end of his
His last
career.
like 4 years.
Exactly. And there was once a season where he averaged more minutes per game than an actual 48 minutes per game, which is
Yeah,
insane.
because he played the
Exactly. So Will
OTs.
Chamberlain didn't rest when Shaq was known for his laziness and he wouldn't go to the gym and work out. So between those two, at least the biggest differentiator would be their stamina.
Yeah, I would say near the end of the game, because there's even clips of, like Wilt Chamberlain sprinting across the course in like fourth or third quarters that he's just still
Exactly.
flying. Like the man's stamina was unmatched. I think it would come down to Shaquille O'Neal not being able to hold his own on the defensive and offensive
Yeah, and Will
side.
Chamberlain was a much better defender than Shaq was, in my opinion, anyway. Because
I would agree.
Shaq is a pretty good defender. He was never really an all defensive level player. He was only really getting blocks because of his size. While Wilt Chamberlain would actually match up against guys like, and then as we mentioned before, he was blocking the unstoppable shot, the skyhook.
Oh yeah. Another thing about that, there is recorded footage of people took full games of Wilt Chamberlain playing defense, and they averaged out the amount of blocks, and he averaged 8.8 blocks per game in a span of
which is
150 games.
insane. Like Shaq, as good as he was averaging like 3 or 4 blocks per game. And Wilt Chamberlain, he was just how smart his basketball IQ on the defensive end was just unmatched, especially for his time and era, which is insane for people to say he played in a weak era. And he also has 7 scoring titles, second to
Yeah.
MJ in all time in NBA history, which shows how much of a scorer he was, especially compared to his era. And he was, even when he was on his last legs, he was still had the ability to score when he needed to. It's just he decided to change his play style to help accommodate his teammates and become more of a willing passer.
Yeah, I would say at the beginning of Wilt Chamberlain's career, he was a little bit too
Yeah,
score heavy. He he just wanted to get the points on the board to try and make his team win, which is honestly a good way of doing it. A lot of scorers can do
yeah,
that nowadays. But with the teams he was on and him going against the Boston Celtics every year, it just didn't
yeah.
work out. So he changed his entire game in the span of 2 years to go from 3.1 assists per game to
Which is
7.8.
insane because you don't see players change. Many players, especially big men, changing their play style. The only other center, well, and he's not even a center to do that really, is Tim Duncan when he changed from more of a post scorer to a playmaker, and even he wasn't on the same level, arguably, as Wilt Chamberlain as a playmaker.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I want to talk about the rings
Okay, yes, for sure.
because he only did get, I believe, two
Yeah,
rings, right?
uh,
He got one in the middle of his career and one at the end of his career.
yeah,
The very first ring he took a Philadelphia team and he carried them so hard he passed the ball, got like I think it was the year he got 7.8 passes per game. He got 24 points per game and 24
yeah,
rebounds per game, which is arguably, in my opinion, the best season of
yeah.
all time in
Which
the
is
regular season.
insane. Yeah,
And then he went on to the playoffs and just carried this team. The second best player was Hal Greer, who was a Hall of Famer and a great player, but I wouldn't consider him a championship
yeah.
player. Maybe a good third or fourth
Exactly, and
option,
most people,
but
most casual NBA fans probably couldn't even name any of his other teammates
Hal Greer,
other than
yeah,
Hal
or
Greer.
anyone
Exactly, and
else.
he was carrying that team to the finals every single year just to get matched up by arguably one of the best teams in NBA history, loaded with Hall of Famers.
Hmm.
So yeah, so especially if you replace Bill Russell with Wilt Chamberlain. I've seen a lot of interviews with Bill Russell saying he knew that Wilt Chamberlain was the best player in the league, and he admitted. And especially just nowadays, his name gets overshadowed by guys like Michael Jordan and LeBron James. But if you go back and ask the players of his era who the greatest player of all time was, they'll all say Wilt Chamberlain.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. A lot of them would say also Bill Russell,
Yeah,
and I think the Bill Russell argument's a little bit unfair
exactly.
because I would say Bill Russell is a better defender and team
Yeah.
leader than
Hmm.
Wilt, but I would not even put him in the conversation of put as a better player
Yeah.
overall because Wilt had just way better
Yeah.
offense in every
Nobody
single
can
aspect.
dispute that.
Yeah, I would say Bill Russell had good passing, but not Wilt's level of passing. And the defense
Yeah.
was definitely better for Bill, but his team was able to hold down the offensive end. So Wilt's out here, right? He has to control both ends of the ball and constantly have this pace going. While Bill could actually be checked out of the game and then be like
Exactly.
a defensive player. But he had teammates to rely on
Exactly, because
while
as
Wilt
I've
didn't.
said multiple times in this video, he had a team full of Hall of Famers, while Wilt Chamberlain didn't have that until the end of his career.
Yeah. Because you can name about like 5 to 6 Celtics players that I think there was
That
7
one
Hall of
team,
Fame
which is just
players on that
ridiculous to
team.
think of, especially people talking about how he
Yeah,
played in a weak era, which is just insane. You can forget about the rest of the whole NBA.
yeah,
He had to go against that one team every single year. That's one reason why he didn't have one championship.
Yeah, another big thing. A lot of people jack him
Yeah,
for one, his free throws, and for two, the refs, which I think is a really weird point because from what I've read and what I've seen, most refs go against Wilt Chamberlain rather than with him. And when it comes to free throws, Wilt wasn't very good at them, so having the ref advantage wouldn't
exactly.
even
And
help in the first
and they
place.
changed how many different rules. He used to dunk his free throws. Like, how insane is that? Like, the man dunked his free throws, and they have to change that. And I'm pretty sure they widened the lanes for Wilt Chamberlain. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
I'm pretty sure they widened the lanes and they, yeah, I think they
Just
made a
for
lot of
Wilt
rules.
Chamberlain.
That's another thing. MJ and
And then
some other
Shaq
players
was
like
the other
that
one, and Charles
had,
Barkley, three in the key. But which is insane. Like,
yeah,
how are you such a dominant player that they're changing the entire shape of the basketball field, or the basketball court, just to accommodate this one player?
hey, your
Okay,
mic's starting to do that in and out thing again, bro.
this.
Say again?
Okay, yeah, I
Same thing.
started to wrap it up. So I think I am like, okay, but yeah. So yeah, changing rules for Will Chamberlain, Jack also. Is there anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of people have the Wilt Chamberlain and MJ conversation a lot, saying who would win in the 1v1 and also who's the better player overall. And I would like to point out that for one, MJ
For
had
sure,
a
and a better
much better
coach.
team, 24/7. Definitely a better coach. Another thing, if you think about it, the only
I
what's
can't
the
even.
coach you can name for Wilt
I
Chamberlain?
can't even name the coach off the top of my head.
Exactly, and you can name almost every single one of MJ's coaches because he had these coaches that knew
And he
exactly
had
how to
teams
play
built
MJ,
right around him.
while
Scottie
Wilt
Pippen,
was basically the
Dennis
coach for his
Rodman,
team.
Steve Kerr. Those are just players that
Yeah,
they knew would get wrong. He didn't get that until his late career.
yeah, definitely. And with the 1v1 situation, I think it's a little bit unfair. I mean, I know MJ can kind of shoot, but with the height advantage that Wilt had and that sort of thing, I just think Wilt
Once
would
Will gets
dominate
the
him in the
ball, the
post
game
and
would be
just
over. Like right
overpower him.
there. There was nothing Jordan could do with
Yeah.
Will. But it's at the same thing. I don't really think Wilt Chamberlain would be able to keep up with Jordan on the perimeter. I think he would be able to contest some of his shots just due to his length and his size. But once Will caught the ball, that game wouldn't be over. So it
Mhm.
wouldn't even be fair for a one-on-one.
Oh yeah, definitely. Agree with
Yeah,
that.
thanks everyone for listening. It's been sure to check him out. Instagram page, Wilt Chamberlain, and leave a comment.